CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
You are hate listening to Tim Graham and Friends.
Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
It's Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And we have three main things anyway, that we want to get into on this podcast. The Bills, who host the Saints on Sunday. Sabres training camp / preseason is going strong. And what's going on with UB football? A big loss to Troy, in which they blew a late lead. That is a non-conference game, but not the best way to start off the 3-game. Was it a 4-game homes? Is it the second game in a 4-game? Okay. Who was the road game after St. Francis?
Well, they played at Kent State.
At Kent State, that's right. Okay. They almost lost at Kent State. Then they come home for the 3-game homestand against Troy, UConn, and Eastern Michigan and step on a rake. We'll get to that a little bit later, as we will the Sabres with some of those storylines here as September gets ready to turn into October. Weird, always a weird time for hockey season. But the Bills, they have the lowly New Orleans Saints on Sunday, 1:00 kick. The TV folks don't even think much of this one. Putting the Bills at 1:00 on Sunday is not common during the Josh Allen era. But the Bills are 15.5-point favorites. It was 16.5 on Sunday. And so a little bit of money coming in on the Saints. I will have to say that 15.5, there have only been 13 other games in Bills history with a spread of that size. Or I should say, actually, wait, hang on a sec. There's some 15s in here. So only 11 games in Bills history have been 15.5 points or wider margin. And funny thing about that is the Bills have lost a couple of those games outright. During their Super Bowl era, they were 16.5-point favorites over Indianapolis on the road and lost the game 16-13 in overtime. And then they were 17-point favorites over the New York Jets at home and lost that game 24-17. But overall, when the Bills have a 15-point spread or more, they are 11-2 heading into this game against the New Orleans Saints. If you're curious about the other betting numbers, the total is 48 points, and you can get it for 47.5, 48.5, depending on where you're going to bet. And if you want to take the Bills on the money line, you want to bet $100 to win minus 2,000 is at MGM Grand or MGM Bets or whatever that app is. Minus 2,000 if you want to go with the Bills on the money line. Jonah, is there any way the Bills lose this game?
I would say no. I think while you were going over all those numbers, I'm trying to figure out if they will actually cover the 16-point spread, kind of, where I would fall on that line. So if you really aren't sure whether the Bills are going to win this game by 14 or 17 points, it would take a lot of tomfoolery or, things that we're not expecting, uncharacteristic mistakes and turnovers by the Bills for that to get to be in a close game. Like, I don't even think it'll be as contested in the fourth quarter as this last game against the Miami Dolphins was. Just doesn't seem like the New Orleans Saints at this point, with Spencer Rattler at quarterback and where they are as a franchise, can come in and beat maybe the best team in the NFL, or at least one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL. If they can cover the spread, if they can keep this game close enough to not lose by 2 touchdowns, it'll seem like a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, and it's minus 2,000. I always got that wrong. Even though I lived in Las Vegas for 5 years, I always had trouble with my minuses and my pluses. I have to stop and think. Minus 2,000 on the money line would be you need to bet $200 to win $10. So if you just feel like you want to pick up a free $10 while risking 200, I mean, good luck. It's not the smartest bet, but you know, you think you're going to pick if you're that confident in the Bills, or bet 2,000 to win 100. However you want to do it, whatever increment you want to do that in. Yeah, first year coach Kellen Moore. He's been interesting through 3 games, really. And you have to go digging to learn about this Saints team because they're not on national TV much. You're not going to see him. Spencer Rattler, I mean, what is he up to through 3 games? Alvin Kamara, to look at him statistically, not doing a lot there. The Saints are going no huddle, which is of interest to the Bills defense this week. A couple extra days of conditioning maybe with that Thursday night game, get that cardio going so that way they can keep up and be fresh. And they're still a little shorthanded on defense. No Ed Oliver, no Matt Milano. They've been ruled out for Sunday. If you're worried about right tackle Spencer Brown and that calf, looks like he's going to be okay because he practiced today. I think that the only way the Bills lose this game is a total collapse. And it's the type of game like we would have seen a couple of years ago against Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars when they lost that field goal fest down there in Florida. But the Bills seem to handle these games very well. Again, Jacksonville was an outlier. Sean McDermott has ways to get his guys focused. He has ways to capture their attention, to talk about keeping the eye on the prize, so to speak. Way too early to talk about things like going undefeated, although our friend John Wara of the Associated Press did ask Sean McDermott at least about going undefeated at home in the final year of the Ralph. And McDermott actually conceded that, yeah, that would be pretty cool. It was, to me, a little uncharacteristic of Sean McDermott to even say that and not just, hey, 1 game at a time. But this is a team that has things shaking out for that first seed. Joe Biscaglia at The Athletic wrote about it today, even after 3 games with what's happening with Kansas City, Cincinnati, and no Joe Burrow. The mishmash of whatever's going on in the AFC North. The Bills have already beaten Baltimore, and then Baltimore is, struggling again. Derrick Henry with that fumble in prime time for a second time in 3 weeks. Really, what do the Bills have to fear regarding stacking up enough wins to be that number 1 seed, get that bye, Jonah?
I
Other
was
than the
wondering
fact
why
that
you were
it's
breaking
way
that
too
down.
early.
I'm wondering do the Bills need to win this home game and all the remaining home games in order to keep that mystique going into the playoffs of how hard it is to win in this stadium, the last year of this stadium, things like that? I don't know. I think maybe the Bills probably lose a regular season home game and still have the same home field advantage in the playoffs, but it does sort of seem like it's building with having not lost a game at home all of last season and the potential to do that again this year and maybe going into the playoffs on a whatever that would be 20-something game home winning streak. That does seem to be like that would aid the mystique a little bit. And if you slip up, for example, a game against the New Orleans Saints and you still get home field advantage, but you lost a winning streak, maybe there's something lost in that regard.
I think that, that losing to the Saints would reveal more than a victory over the Saints for sure, in terms of all those things that I was saying that the Bills are traditionally good at: focus, attention to detail, defending your dirt, as Sean McDermott likes to call it, and the phrase that he also brought up in answering John Wara's question. But the schedule does shake out pretty well. They have the New England Patriots at home next week. That is a Sunday night game. Then at Atlanta before the bye. Then they come back from the bye at Carolina before they get the Kansas City Chiefs at home on November 2nd. Even with all of these optimistic aspects of the season as they're starting to unfold, not only at One Bills Drive, but around the league. Houston doesn't even seem like much of a threat through 3 weeks. CJ Stroud has been awful. There are a lot of teams that you thought, the Chargers, yes, the Chargers and the Colts are teams that have been a surprise so far through the first few games, but the Bills don't play either of those teams. The Chargers are in one of the toughest divisions, I think, in the NFL, being the AFC West. Can the Colts thrive in that weak AFC South? But the Bills do have those cross division games that really are favorable this year with the AFC North and the AFC or the NFC West, or excuse me, the NFC South. There's still a lot that makes fans nervous, it seems, through the first few weeks. And there's the third down defense, which has come back to look pretty dicey as it was last year. Bobby Babich hasn't necessarily gotten that straightened out, despite pitching a shutout against the Jets. No conversions on 11 attempts in week 2, but then one of the worst third down performances in team history, definitely under Sean McDermott, against the Dolphins. But the offensive stuff, too. The offense has been great. We were talking about it off the air. Josh Allen is now the solo favorite to win MVP for a second straight year. James Cook might be the best running back in the NFL so far. And yet people are worried about the Bills not going downfield or not getting Khalil Shakir enough targets, or where's Curtis Samuel, or I don't know, fill in the blank. There's probably even some other ones. Did I say not going downfield enough? Is it just people are spoiled? Or
no, I mean,
what do you think it is?
There's valid questions about some of these specific, I don't want to say issues, but elements of the Bills offense that haven't been A+ caliber so far, or things that people want to see from the Bills offense that haven't materialized yet. Now it's only 3 games, different opponents, different game plans. Maybe we'll see more of it as the weeks progress. But I do think it's kind of valid if you're a Bills fan and you do want to poke holes and really see if they're Super Bowl caliber in every element of the game. And then the Bills haven't really shown that yet, even though they have a lot of strength at quarterback, running the ball, offensive line, and different things like that. The special teams has been shaky, and there's things to wonder about. Matt Prater has been pretty good, but how at his age and his experience, and when the weather changes, how much can you count on him as the Bills kicker later in the season? Will Tyler Bass come back? Will he be healthy? How will he perform coming in midseason if that's the case? So there's different things that could play out. The defensive injuries haven't cost the Bills yet, but if they keep piling up, it does seem like that's something that you could start to worry about as the season gets longer and longer. Is Maxwell Hairston going to come back and be a factor on this defense? That's a big unknown right now. Are the Bills any better at cornerback or safety or wide receiver or any of the positions of concern from the offseason? I don't really know if we've gotten any of that answered yet. But with all of those questions, they're 3-0 and number 1 or number 2 in all the NFL power rankings, and seem to be on an easy streak going towards home field advantage in the playoffs. I don't think there's anything to worry about the present day Bills, but you can be concerned about the future and how things change and what potential cracks in the armor the Bills are showing, because if they do become actual weaknesses later in the season, you'll say, yeah, we did see that coming a little bit in September.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, Jonah, because just last episode, the Bills haven't played in between our that episode and this one because of the Thursday night game. But we did discuss how the Bills were just a few plays away from being 1-2. So as much as they seem like they have things in hand, we haven't learned or seen anything since that episode when we were at least bringing up that possibility. And I think the reason being is because we saw more football around the NFL. And to me, it's the antithesis of watching the Sabres. and I'm not using this as a segue yet to get into the Sabres, but we talk on this podcast now and then about how enlightening it is to see NHL games that aren't the Sabres. When you get used to watching the Sabres on a night to night basis, or all 82 games, or trying to cover them and follow them, and then you get to see us, especially when you get to the playoffs and you get to sit down for a series of games and you're like, oh, this is how football is supposed to be played. We've gotten that way with the Bills, thankfully. I mean, blessed as people who cover the NFL after all those years of the drought, and as fans, having to endure all of those bad Bills teams, to now see a brand of football that is superior to what we see. Even, the Giants were on Monday Night Football. Some of these games that we saw, the games that we got on Sunday, if you don't have the NFL ticket and you were watching just the games on over the air, you saw Jets. No, wait, what was it? Patriots and Steelers, was it? I can't even remember what the games were, but they were like, I don't really care about those games. Let me just remind everybody what we were watching. We saw Patriots, Steelers, Patriots with their 5 turnovers, the Steelers barely able to win that game. Jets, Buccaneers was the other game, blocked field goals and all kinds of stuff. I mean, the primetime game again was Lions, Ravens, which was amazing. That was a great freaking game. But the Giants, Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, in which the Giants looked awful and Russell Wilson looked awful and the Chiefs did not look particularly great. And so here we are with a week to digest of what's going on around the NFL, and it makes the Bills look that much better. Do you still, maybe wipe away the cobwebs and remember how we were just talking about how the Bills could be 1-2 right now without a couple of Terrell Bernard?
Well, yeah, I think I made that point, but
takeaways. Yeah.
What I was explaining then and I'd say now is that the Bills also look like they might be the best team in the league or in the Super Bowl favorites. And that's how kind of thin the line between, success and failure is in the NFL.
And a lot of people were on the Packers, even if you want to talk about the NFC, and then the Packers offense looked terrible again. And not great. The Cleveland's defense is glorious. It's a great defense, but the Packers should beat the Browns, right?
Sure. But, there's results like that in the NFL every week, every year. What the Bills have avoided for a couple seasons going back now is the WTF loss. The how did you lose that game to a team like the Saints when you're 15.5-point favorites? And maybe I used to say one of those was always coming on the schedule. The Bills would always have a game they lost that they should have won and a game they won that they should have lost or something like that. And I would assume every team had that every so often, but the Bills have not had that much recently, and there's very little expectation that that will happen in any of these games. Like if you look at the Bills' schedule and you're trying to pick out losses, it's usually because it's the hardest team on the schedule, the hardest game on the schedule. We're not expecting the Bills to have any letdown games or get beat by an inferior opponent or lose at home to somebody they shouldn't be losing at home to at any point in time unless Josh Allen were to get hurt.
Anything else we want to say about the Bills, Jonah, before we move on to the Sabres?
No, I think the Bills are,
that
boring in a good way as they were at Hard Knocks and through training camp, that things are going so well and so according to plan. I mean, maybe Bills fans aren't bored with how much fun it is to watch them win, especially at home when the weather's nice and you're tailgating. But storyline, talking point wise, the Bills are, to their credit, making it a little bit boring to talk about how good the Bills are.
Before we get to the Sabres, let's just stay with football for a little bit. Jonah, UConn at UB, 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. How does this game shape up?
Here we go. This is what's fun. A team with intrigue and blowing a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter at home to lose. And then, they were on a 2-game win streak, but it seemed to be headed for a 3-game win streak with that 17-0 lead and potential to keep winning. And, 2 more home games on the schedule and some road games that are easy. Now they're not on a winning streak. Now they lost the game, and you're wondering if they can turn it around and get back to a winning record and on track for bowl eligibility. So that was, I thought, an intriguing, you call it a collapse or a meltdown or what you will, but just a change in the narrative of the season that happened within one quarter of the game. And it happened after quarterback Taquan Robeson injured his lower left legs. I think it was an ankle injury, but it's being termed lower left leg. And he's doubtful to play, probably won't play tomorrow against UConn. The UB offense really struggled with backup quarterback Gunnar Gray, uh, junior college transfer who's in his third year at UB, but he's never been the starter. He's been a backup to different quarterbacks during his time. And UConn beat UB by 31 points last year. That game was at UConn. Getting back to UB Stadium, I think UB will play better and keep the game closer than that. But with a backup quarterback and some of the issues, the defense was playing really well for 3 quarters and then showed some cracks in the fourth quarter. It's hard to pick UB as a favorite to win this game, but playing at home, well-coached team. I don't think they lost two. They didn't lose two in a row at any point last season. We'll see how they respond now to a little bit of adversity in their season and a little bit of crisis management, if you will.
I don't know what happened there. I was muted there for a second. I think I might have done it to myself while I was blowing my schnoz. So anyways, UB opened as a 1.5 favorite in this game, which I'm shocked by. And it is now 3.5, or you can get 4 points for UConn. I should say actually for UB. UB is the underdog now by 4 points, depending on what book you can get to, 3.5 in most places. But that probably relates to the quarterback situation, like you mentioned, but also to be a 31-point differential to a 1.5-point favorite just because you're home. Now, of course, you're talking about different teams and turnover and stuff like that, but I think that also would be appealing to a bettor if you were to see that UConn is getting a 1.5 in the beginning. Now they're giving 3.5 or 4. What does the loss to Troy do to UB, if anything? Is that a throwaway?
Yes and no. It does lower their ceiling ultimately in terms of, flirting with maybe the wins record or a long winning streak that could generate some buzz and going undefeated in non-conference games, or not undefeated, but 3-1, which they don't always do. And there were some things on the, having 7 home games. This was that 7th home game, really, from a scheduling purpose and taking advantage of that. If you lose that game, you didn't really get the benefit of those 7 home games. And even if they lose this game against UConn, they'd be 2-3. They still are in a good position, I think, to contend in the MAC and run off some wins when they get into conference play and get bowl eligible and have a successful season. But these 2 games were very crucial in terms of getting to 9 or 10 wins and having a great season. They needed to at least, I think, win one of these games. And they still could win against UConn, but in winning both of them, if they had somehow did that, would have set them up for a really, really memorable season, I think.
Will it be a memorable season for the Buffalo Sabres, Jonah Bronstein? You've been out there at least more than I've been. I'm obviously sticking with the Buffalo Bills, and I was out there a couple of times this week working on a couple of stories, and you were out at Buffalo Sabres training camp, or went to one of the preseason games, I should say. I was actually surprised to hear your take on the vibe out there as the season's about to begin. You mentioned that
was my read on it, was pretty calm and a little bit of a quiet confidence. Now, maybe any NHL team is going to project that early in the season or in the preseason, and this was a preseason game that they had won, and they won the night before. But I don't know, for a team that's has this longest losing streak in NHL history, and Kevin Adams and Lindy Ruff, we believe, in the last year of their contracts, and Alex Tuck in the last season of his contract without a contract extension in place yet, and some questions about, where this team goes from here if they don't make the playoffs again. There doesn't seem to be any, or, I'm not feeling the desperation and the hand-wringing that might associate some of that. Maybe it's a little bit, there's a lot of things that are different, but maybe it's a little bit like the year when the Bills ended their playoff drought, when the expectations were low, but you felt some sort of culture shifts going on there. And then they started that season off well, and they ultimately made the playoffs, but they probably got themselves into the playoffs with a good September that year. And I think the Sabres have an opportunity to do that with a lot of home games early on, and they need to stay healthy. But right now, I think they're going to go into the regular season with the health that they need, get off to a good start, and at least be in the race. And there, I do think there's some belief that the Sabres can end the playoff drought this year, but they need a lot of things to go right for them. But right now, before the season, every fan base in the NFL has some degree of hopefulness. It seems like the Sabres, I think that has some merit, that there's a little bit of hope that this is maybe, possibly, sort of, hopefully, kind of the year for this team.
Yeah, I'm not rolling I don't see it, but I'm also not going to roll my eyes at the idea of the calmness or the relaxed aspect around there, because I think that's probably healthy, all things considered. It's better than everybody being tightly wound and just expecting for the axe to fall or for disaster to strike. So if they are loose, I think that's a good sign. I don't think that necessarily portends to getting over it or here it comes, they're going to finally break through, but it's better than the alternative. I just don't see that enough has happened with the roster. And I think that too much of it still depends on goaltenders who have a history of being inconsistent. And unless this is a team that really has needed and almost above average to great goaltending consistently, not just somebody who can be great once out every 3 or 4 starts, or one who's, or even good, that's been just too uneven. And of course, you talked about it earlier, more defensive forwards, people who are better in their own end, all that type of stuff that Lindy Ruff really values out of his forwards, a little more toughness, all these types of things that hopefully it adds up, even though fans have wanted that bigger move or a little more obvious move. Maybe a bunch of these little moves will add up, but that's what they tried to do heading into last season and certainly didn't work because the goaltending was uneven. And that's the thing that I'm just going to I have to see some significant improvement on the back end for me to buy into this team.
Well, we'll see how significant it needs to be, because I do think they're going to be better defensively, both on the back end and team defense. Goaltending is a question mark. And then, how do you, I know there's hockey analytics to break this down, but if the Sabres are better defensively, but get worse goaltending, does that lead to more goals allowed or less goals allowed, or the same issues with actually winning and losing games? We'll see. But there was that Lindy Ruff effect. It took more than half of the season to take hold last year, but it really seemed to help the team play better and be more competitive and win more games in the last couple months of last season. It seems like it's permeated. It's definitely had its effect on shaping the roster. Like you're saying, they haven't done enough in some ways. If you're playing the NHL video game or fantasy hockey or some sort of, statistical analysis of the Sabres that relies a lot on production and offensive play, they're worse. They've gotten rid of some of their best goal scorers over the last couple of years, and they still have good goal scorers, but they haven't added new star players on that way. So I don't think they're a worse team, but on paper, they don't look any better. But maybe, that on paper high scoring lineup that they had a couple of years ago didn't make the playoffs, and there was a lot of talk that the Sabres needed a different style of player and had too many skilled young forwards. Maybe they've balanced the roster out to where they can be more of a playoff hockey team and less of a EA NHL hockey team that they resembled in years past.
The shell, as the kids say. Or the chell, I guess. The chell. The chell.
Yeah, but I don't have kids saying that to me,
Shell. The
so
chell. Well,
shell out.
right. Anything else we need to get to, Jonah, before we wrap it up?
I don't know. I talk Canisius St. Joe's football. They're having that game tomorrow.
Well, you can
I'll
talk
mention
about
this.
it. I don't know anything
Elijah
about it.
Kimball, junior running back on Canisius. He's, I think, 118 yards away from setting the school record in his junior year. And that's held by Kadri Olesen, who went on to play at Pitt and drafted into the NFL and played a few years in the NFL. And, Kimball's a junior, so he has an opportunity to potentially break the all-time rushing record next season. And I think get into somewhere like the top 5 by the end of this season. There's no guarantee for any high school athlete that he doesn't go to a prep school or comes back to Buffalo next year, but he hasn't done that yet. He already has 27 Division I offers. And so we'll see if he probably will break this record, if not tomorrow, within the next 2 weeks, and then he will go on to potentially chasing down more records in Western New York.
Speaking of records, we talked about Joe Licata and his passing records that are falling. And I happened to run into Joe Licata that night after we did that podcast, and I asked him about it, and it was an interesting conversation. He used to hold the state 3-point record, and he said that was really the only one he cared about. And the reason makes sense is because he went on to UB and set all the records at UB and had a cup of coffee with the Cincinnati Bengals, spent a training camp with them and played in preseason games. And so he always viewed that 3-point record as a way to keep himself a two-sport, using finger quotes, two-sport star. And once he lost the 3-point record, he didn't care about the passing records anymore. So a gracious Joe Licata about seeing his records fall as time goes on.
Well, 2 records that are hard to hold these days, passing and 3-point shooting, with the way both of those sports are evolving. Those records get broken more regularly than rushing records,
That's true. So what would now be the hard records to get? Your field goal percentage?
I don't, who was the all-time leader in field goal percentage at like Western New York High School? I don't know.
Or your 2-point field goal percentage?
Yeah,
I don't know
I
what
don't
it would
know.
be.
Run
You need to be
stuffing,
regressive
the
in
run
some
stuffing
way.
middle linebacker records, those are all unbreakable these days.
Right. All right, Jonah, thanks for this. And thanks to everybody out there for watching/listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Please like, favorite, rate, do all those things, subscribe. We are grateful for all that. And we will see you next week.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.